Hello, welcome to WD18, the Watford fan channel. It's finished Leicester City 4, Watford 1. That's now 7 defeats on the bounce for the Hornets, 20 goals conceded in those 7 games. And it's fair to say, I think myself and Sam aren't feeling particularly positive about the next 3 games for Watford, which are Newcastle, Burnley, and Norwich. I mean, it's a huge period for the football club. We'll look ahead to those 3 games, but we're going to be discussing today's FA Cup third round defeat at the King Power Stadium. Ironically enough, Sam, it does have the King Power in its title, and we lost a little bit of power midway through the game with the floodlights. But yeah, and what's your initial reaction to that? We were kind of the first time in a while we've done a kind of live match reaction straight after the game, and we don't want to be too reactionary, but I'm struggling to find positives out of that game, Sam.
Yeah, I was just saying to you before we came on air, it's not very often I lose interest. When we're going down 1-0 after, what was it, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
5 minutes, yeah.
I found it very difficult just to really get into the game. So it's difficult for me to absorb anything. I think there were, all right, I think 4-1 flattered Leicester a bit, if I'm being honest. And I don't think the result reflects as bad as the performance appears to be, if that makes sense. But at the same time, I think it perfectly captures Watford's season. We were positive going forward. Thought Zhao had a really good game. Cucho looked bright. Fletcher was okay, aside from a shocking dive. Really, really poor attempt of a dive that.
In the second half. Yeah.
At the back, absolute shambles all over the place. Sear out of 5 minutes in, as I said. Craig Cathcart caught ball watching for one of the goals. Just an absolute shambles. And as I said, there's positives to take, but as with Watford season as a whole, it doesn't matter how many positives there are, our defence will always let us down.
Yeah, agreed. It's just the same individual errors we're seeing, Sam. And, frustrating for me today is you look at the back four. Obviously, James Morris came in at left back, but Jeremy Ngakia, who I thought did well going forward, struggled a little bit, I thought, going back. But the 2 centre-backs in Cathcart and Sierralta, we brought in Samir, but these are 2 centre-backs that Sierralta in particular, who you would put as one of the names down in the team sheet. Cathcart's been playing regularly this season. It's the same mistakes. It's the same errors we're seeing week in, week out. And Sam, we look at the last 7 games, 20 goals conceded, 4, regardless of whether you value the FA Cup and how important it is in this season, Sam, another 4 goals conceded away from home. We're not seeing any improvement in the back line. And does it feel like, from your perspective, that the board and the club and us as fans, we're now relying on signings to come in and effectively save our season, particularly in defensive areas?
Yeah, but I mean, it's frustrating because we've been saying the same thing now for 18 months. We had the best defensive record in the Championship, but there were still sort of leaks at the back, or we weren't scoring enough goals. This season, it's been a shambles at the back. Whenever we've had to score at least 3 goals a game to win any game of football this season. It's a mess, and we keep on talking about recruitment because we just don't seem to get it right. I don't think there's a point in talking about it because we all know it's exactly the same thing every single week. It remains to be seen whether the signings we brought in so far will be enough or are good enough. But I think today just showed the fragility of previous lapses in recruitment. I think Craig Cathcart, on the whole, I quite like him. I think he's had an okay season, probably better than a lot of the defenders, but today was all over the place. Really, really poor today. Sierralta was a mess today. Awful. Probably one of his worst performances in a Watford shirt. Put that up there with Wolves earlier this season from Sierralta. But at the same time, while it is recruitment, it's the basics we're getting wrong as well. It is things like, misplaced passes or good opportunities to score that we had today, or simply, not clearing the ball when we have to, or ducking under the ball that we've seen this season. It's the basics that you can't necessarily put down to recruitment. It's just that it's almost brainless in a way you think of how a professional footballer can do that. It's frustrating. It's sort of demoralising. And going into, you can see my mood now. I normally try and be upbeat, but I know this is a cup game, but going into 3 of the biggest games in years, could argue for years for Watford, it feels like, with fans back in the ground as well. If our mood's like this as a fan base, imagine what it's like in the dressing room. We go 1 down at Newcastle early on next week, the game's done. 1-0 down at Burnley, the game's done. Norwich 1-0 down against them, the game's done. Heads drop so easily. The attitude is not the attitude necessarily. I don't doubt the players' attitude. The confidence is on rock bottom at the moment. I've seen Lou Warnes in the comments say Nkuli's out till April. Probably bring another centre half then. I
think, Sam, sorry to jump in there. I think I completely agree with you in the sense that it feels demoralising watching Watford at the minute. Now, as I said, take away the fact it was a cup game. You know, the league is the priority for Watford this season. Of course, it would have been nice to have a cup run, EFL Cup, or the Carabao Cup, the FA Cup. But the Premier League is the focus. But I just cannot see it improving unless, I mean, we are literally relying on signings to come in and hit the ground running. I think what I wanted to ask you, Sam, was we look at, you know, a lot of the time at Watford, in particular under the Potsos, the head coach and the manager do get a lot of the scrutiny. Now, 10 defeats in 13 under Ranieri. Do you think he's on borrowed time going into the next 3 games? Could you see the Potsos acting and changing the manager before what is arguably, and I think we can all agree, the 3 most important games of our season?
I don't think you could put anything past the Potsos, to be honest. I don't think anyone would be too shocked if we saw them get rid of Ranieri this week before those 3 games and sort of rely on that new manager bounce going into it. Problem is, where do you go after that? Because would you see the same patterns emerging? I think Claudio Ranieri is the best man for the job. I don't think there's anyone who could do a better job than Claudio Ranieri. And I know you'll point to the 10 defeats in 12 or, 20 goals conceded in the last 7 games or whatever ridiculous amount of goals it is. There isn't a better man for the job, I don't think. I really trust Claudio. I think this is all on recruitment and the quality of players rather than him. I think obviously there are certain tactical decisions that he could be getting right and could be looking at better. Like, for example, I think his substitutions getting progressively worse. I think we were originally praising his substitutions, the Man United game being the classic example, but I think by the week they're getting worse. Whether that's down to options and availability, I don't know. I thought they'd sack him after Tottenham. I don't know if they'd sack him after an FA Cup game but my sort of flip side to that would be the reason why everyone who's going against the Cup game, you shouldn't be too disappointed. With the exception of Ashley Fletcher and James Morris, I think every other player in there's probably started this season for us in Premier League or is in contention to start.
That's almost more concerning for me, Sam.
Exactly. If this is our fringe team, or supposedly our fringe team, and these are all players starting them are a mess. And it's... you can probably tell my body language. I don't get excited watching us. It's just the last 7 games particularly, it's just been turning up, seeing the same thing over and over again. You know what's going to come. You know it's going to be a defensive lapse and concentration. You know when we go 1-0 down, it's game over. It's just frustrating. I feel disconnected. I feel hopeless with it all. And it's difficult. It's a difficult time to be a Watford fan, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think as I'm reading in the comments as well and just seeing what we're seeing online at the minute, I think a lot of people are feeling the same as you, mate, in just terms of it. I think the word demoralising absolutely sums it up for me. Absolutely sums it up. But as I will say again, I just cannot see it improving. And I think that's where, look, the recruitment so far I can get behind because we are addressing areas. My fear is it is one window too late. I think we could all see going into the season there were certain areas, particularly the likes of left back. We took a gamble on Danny Rose. Hasn't paid off. He's leaving the club. You look at the centre backs. Centre backs that haven't really worked in the Premier League before. We didn't upgrade, and we've taken punts on certain players, the likes of Tufan, who I thought was poor again today. And Sam, before let's go into today's game. And for me, look, the standouts from my point of view, I thought Morris held his own, particularly on his debut. I thought Ngakia looked bright. The 2 centre backs had a poor game. I think Zhao was probably our man of the match. Is that fair? Out of the players that played, because he looked bright, didn't he? And you feel sorry for him because he's almost carrying this team at the moment, particularly in the midfield and dropping in to create chances.
Yeah, I think, and we saw that against Tottenham as well. We looked so much more dangerous going forward when João Pedro came on. That's the bright spark. That was the bright spark last season when we were struggling with João Pedro as well. I've said already that boy's going right to the top. We're really lucky to have him, but there's only so much he can do. The midfield today, I mean, you didn't even mention them because there was nothing to talk about. They were complete passengers, all 3 of them. There was nothing there. Tom Cleverley coming back from injury still. I don't think, did he touch the ball today, Tom Cleverley? I don't think so. Sissoko had a poor game, but, I think we can excuse it with Sissoko because he's been a good signing. And Ozan Tufan is not good enough again. Passenger, probably the definition of a passenger. I've seen that it's likely we will get him permanently. I think there's so many like different loopholes in the contract and stuff. I think isn't it, if we stay up, we have to sign him, obligation, or even if we go down.
I think
I don't
yeah,
know.
there's obligation
It's
to buy
something
him.
like that. So it's Zhao, Morris, and Ngakia, as you said. I think they were the biggest positives today, but except for that, really poor all round.
I think you summed it up, mate, in terms of. I think it was Don Baker on Twitter. Make sure you go and drop Dom a follow. He said today was the story of our season. Attacking talent wasted by a back four constantly out of shape, so easy to break down. And just to add to that, you mentioned the midfield, no protection for that back line as well. You know, I don't think it's fair on Moussa Sissoko to be playing him as a kind of defensive midfielder. I think he's either a bit further forward as an 8. I think that's the best performance we've seen from Moussa this season. We missed Emran Loser in that holding role. I thought Conte, when he came on, looked pretty good actually when he was sitting. But the one I wanted to pick out, and this is nothing personal with Ozan Tufan. You know, that's not the case with myself and Sam. He is a passenger in this Watford team. I've seen 8 games from him so far this season, and he hasn't made an impact on or off the ball. He looks unfit. I actually think he looks bewildered. Actually, Sam, he looks. I mean, he's not a player who looks like he's played 65 times for his country. I
feel slightly sorry for him as well. I think we all had large expectations for him with the reputation that he came with. We saw the caps, we saw on social media all the Turkish fans saying how good he was, and he's just been massive letdown. I felt like today Ranieri threw him in there almost as a last chance sort of thing to give yourself an impact. I thought I think his debut was Leeds away. I thought he was okay. Gotten a really good scoring opportunity where I think he hit the bar, but since then, he as you say, he doesn't do anything on the ball or off the ball. He doesn't touch the ball. He doesn't do anything, off the ball. It's nothing personal against Tufan. I just don't want him starting anymore or even coming off the bench unless there's a big improvement.
Yeah, Ellis agrees. He says Tufan is not worth his spot in the 11 or on the bench. Adam makes a comment that's been floating around on social media, Sam. I know you have an opinion on the goalkeeper situation. I think we need a new goalkeeper. Batman is a good shot stopper, but has useless feet. And there was a couple more comments on the goalkeeper situation. Could you see two questions? Could you see us bringing in a keeper this window? And do you think we should bring in a keeper?
It's a difficult one because if we hadn't have signed Okoye a few weeks ago to come in the summer, I would have said, get on a goalkeeper. We need one. I wouldn't say it's a matter of urgency. I'd say hearing the Nkulu news, I think it's another centre half is more important than that. And I think we will get that, be it Vida or Nat Phillips or whatever. I think it's difficult. I don't think either goalkeeper is good enough between Ben Foster and Daniel Batman. I was a big advocate for Batman last season. He was brilliant. I thought this season he's been a shadow of that player. He clearly doesn't want to be there. I have a big problem with the way he's spoken out against the club about him wanting new moves and that sort of thing. It's more of a question of whether we get someone in on loan, I think, till the end of the season. Perhaps someone like Dean Henderson, a lot of fans have been calling for. I don't think that will happen. I don't think that's realistic. If anything, someone would come in on loan. I don't know if we can trust Foster to stay fit. We've seen him get injured a couple of times this season. So perhaps we could bring someone in on loan, but I don't think we'll bring a new keeper in.
No, I agree. I think with Okoye, it makes it very difficult to bring in almost a Carnesi situation where you bring in someone on loan for like 6 months.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be difficult to, unless it is someone again from Udinese, maybe Alex Merritt. Is he still Udinese? But you get the point. He was Udinese. I guess it would have to be that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
They play for Napoli now, but we'd bring in someone from Udinese. And Sam, you look at some of the other areas of the pitch, that centre-back situation. We've been linked with Nat Phillips, Vida as well, the Croatian centre-back. It does feel Samir has to come in, a switch to a back 3 potentially. Would you be a fan of? Because I certainly think that's the way to go. I don't think with the quality we have at centre back, no disrespect to the players at the football club, we can continue to play a 4 at the back. I think we need that extra centre back in there for cover.
Yeah, I think the words we used last week after the Tottenham game, after that back 6 or whatever it was wrapping the centre halves in cotton wool. I think we all said Troost-Ekong had a good game last week, and he did, in all fairness to him, but that was because he had so much protection. And I think that has to be the way forward with this side, because I think it's a matter, we can't rely on them to hold their own in the back 4, and it's about protecting them in the back 5, making sure we stay as compact as possible, as few holes as possible. The problem is whether we have the quality for that. I think the advantage is Kamara, I think is more suited to left wing back. I think I've read. I don't know enough about Kamara, I'll be honest. Samir apparently is best in, I think, on the left of the back three. I'm not too sure again. I think Troost-Ekong, Sierralta, whoever plays in there will need that protection from everyone else around them. I think probably if we go to a back five, it'll be Kiko Femenia at right wing back, who we know is better in a back five than a back four. So I think it does make sense if we go to a back five. Whether we do, it's a bit, we'll have a week, unless they spent last week working on it as well. It'll be a week to work on that with the new signings. Probably not long enough for that. It's probably something you work on in the pre-season. So whether we do is a whole nother story.
Yeah, we've got a few comments on the back three situation. Makes no sense, Luan says, with the signings we made to continue to play a four. Ellis says we clearly can't play a back four. And if we're going to try a back three, why didn't we try today?
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, mate.
No, it's a good point. As I say, it's not long enough to spend a week on it with the new signings. If we were going to try the back three, we should have experimented today. Even when we go 4-1 down and there's 20 minutes left or whatever it was, we should have tried it then for the last 20 minutes and just see how it works. A moment I think of with that was when Arsenal were beating Chelsea 3-0 and Antonio Conte changed it to a back three for the last 20 minutes or so, and Chelsea went on to win the league. And obviously, we're not going to do that, albeit we have Ranieri. But I'm saying it's when you're sort of looking at damage limitation, at that point you start risking things. So it is a good point as to why we didn't try out the back three at some point today.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few comments. I think people are getting behind that idea of a three just because of the number of goals we're shipping at the moment. AB in the comment section, 5-2-3, and that's the lineup he would go for with Kamara and Kiko as the wing back, Samir Sierralta and a new centre back, Sissoko Loser cleverly when he's back from AFCON, and then Dennis King Pedro. And Sam, we look at that front three as AB's mentioned. I mean, the talent there is fantastic, particularly for the Premier League. But it just feels like we are crying out for another centre back who's Premier League quality and another maybe central defensive midfielder. Kiembe, who we've signed from UPenn, KAS UPenn, is to come in, but it's going to take a lot. I think we've got to be realistic now, aren't we, Sam, as Watford fans, that it's going to take not a miracle because we're in a position where we can still stay in this division, but I think we'll know. Is it fair to say we'll know the fate of our season after? Not next week, but the week after.
I think 2 weeks today, I think we'll know what league we'll be in next season. I mean, obviously not official. You can make the Great Escape, but I think we can get a pretty good indication. Look, my fear is I think Norwich won't stay up. I don't want to say they're gone because you never know, but I don't think they'll stay up. And that leaves it between, I'd say, Watford, Burnley, Newcastle, and I'd still say Leeds are scrapping down there as well. I think Leeds will be fine because they've got quality, and whether you rate Bielsa or not, I think he'll have enough to get them over the line. I think Newcastle will spend their way out of it. I know they lost today despite playing Kieran Trippier and Maxman. They lost to Cambridge, I think it was.
But
they're going to throw more money at it even before our game. They're looking at Diego Carlos. I can't remember who else they're linked with, but they're throwing money at it. Burnley always seem to find a way. Whether this season's going to be different, they'll make it difficult for teams against them. I just worry about us. I think what we got the goals of Dennis, but except for that, all right, midfield hasn't been great last few weeks. Defence is a shambles. Goalkeepers aren't great. I just worry.
Sam, just to jump in there, how many of the players in the team at the moment would get in, bar Norwich, would get in other Premier League teams, do you think? So let's say outside the top six. So like your mid-table team. How many do you think would get in for the current Watford team? Because I don't think any of the back four or five would. Personally,
no, I think two, probably Dennis and Sissoko.
Maybe King.
Maybe King. I was going to say maybe João Pedro.
I mean, that says it all, really, doesn't it? Like it's the attacking area where we've got the quality, just being let down. I mean, we're almost repeating ourselves, aren't we? We've mentioned it so many times in the show, Sam, like about our defensive frailties and why I can't see it improving, because we can score as many goals as we want, but if we're leaking the goals we are at the minute, it'll be very difficult to turn it around. And that's why I guess people are saying back Ranieri, because I think it would take... Look, I can understand why people are saying change it going into a 3-game period, but I also understand why people are like back Ranieri, because ultimately I think it would take a genius stop the goals we're leaking at the minute. It's crazy amount of goals and unacceptable for a Premier League team.
I can understand both sides of the argument. I'm Ranieri. I love Ranieri. I'd stick with him, but I can understand why people are now saying, all right, the change needs to happen, because it's not acceptable 7 defeats in a row. The performances haven't really changed since Xisco Munoz. All right, we seem a bit more organised at times, but it hasn't really changed. My question would be, is there anyone to come in? Because people would say Big Sam or that sort of thing. Well, it didn't work under Nigel Pearson, because ultimately we know this dressing room's full of egos, and there'll be a clash of egos in there if the likes of Big Sam came in. Look, we're so weird as well. We're not even in the bottom 3. That's the strange thing, and we're all saying it's done. We just, I think we said we'd do a video previewing next week. Because there's 3 cup finals, 3, and I don't say cup finals lightly. I genuinely mean it's cup. I don't think we can afford to lose any of those games. I think 7 points is a minimum there, because it's not necessarily a case of us dropping points. It's a case of letting the teams around us gain points, and that would be the problem. Yeah, it's difficult.
Difficult, isn't it? Yeah, let's have a look through the comments. Adam thinks that Ranieri is the solution, not the problem. The problem is we have a rubbish defence. And Jack says in the comments, getting rid of Ranieri does absolutely nothing. Gives us potentially 2 games where a change of tactics gets us over the line. Then we're back to square one.
That's what I'm saying. It's this Watford team. It's just new manager bounces. It's rinse and repeat every single season. We'll have 3 games of the new manager bounce. Then it'll be 10 games of us being rubbish, and then we'll start again. It's the same thing, and everyone's fed up now. We just, I think Ranieri's the man who can give us stability. I don't think he'll be here next season, but at least till the end of this season, I think.
I know it's irrelevant with Watford and how we operate sometimes, but he did sign a 2-year deal. So, the ball is in Ranieri's court in that respect. I don't think he's going to resign. I think he'd wait for him to be sacked, because ultimately, you know how it works with sackings and the payout for a manager. It's really hard to process this, Sam, because we're coming up to a really big week, and it's not all doom and gloom, because ultimately, as we mentioned, the 3 games can ultimately put us in a position where, let's just hypothetically say we get between 7 to 9 points out of the 3 games, which ultimately I'm not feeling particularly confident about getting at the minute, but that can obviously change. That could put us in a position where you're looking at it going, we've got a great chance of staying in this division. But then on the flip side, we get 3 points out the next 3, and you're going, we're done. So it is almost make or break at this point, isn't it? I don't think it's too far to say that at this point.
Yeah, I think we'll get 3 points. I think we'll beat Norwich. I think that'll be the only one we'll win. I think we'll lose next week at Newcastle. I think that place will be bouncing. They'll have more than just Kieran Trippier in there. They'll have new signings at that point. It really feels like the start of their new era at Newcastle. I can see us losing there next week. Burnley, I think, Sean Dyche will have our game, when it was scheduled a few weeks ago, scheduled now, whatever. He had that circled in red saying that is when we need 3 points, and they'll be up for it. Can see us losing there. I think Norwich will be at home. So, look, perhaps I'm being too pessimistic here, but I don't think we've been given too much reason to be positive. Yeah. That's the thing.
Bar season, isn't it? It's bar individuals who are giving us a bit of hope, like João, Emmanuel, but they collectively, I haven't seen enough this season to suggest that it's going to improve, because we're making the same mistakes under 2 different managers. One end of the spectrum, you've got a guy who's inexperienced in Xisco. You've got another end of the spectrum, we've brought in a really experienced head in Ranieri. He's got a proven track record. And the consistency is we're making the same individual errors and the same mistakes every game. So I don't think you're being pessimistic in that respect. I think from the question I would like to ask you is, what would have to change in the next 3 games for you to view our season differently? Is it simply points? Is it performances? How would your mood change around this Watford team?
Look, it's not a case of we bring in 11 signings this week. That's not going to happen. What's frustrating is because you have I think this week it's points. I don't care if we play badly in all 3 games. I think we just need points in all of those games. I think what's frustrating is that in those games when we had that terrible run against Chelsea, Man City, Leicester, or whatever it was, I said we could get away with not getting points if we see performances, and we did. We saw 3 decent performances, particularly against Chelsea. We didn't really get battered in any of those games. And then we said, all right, it's now time to transfer those performances into points. Since then, the performances have gone downhill, and we've looked awful ever since those. We've had West Ham, a couple of games postponed, Tottenham, and it just hasn't been good enough at all. But I think this time it's sort of the reverse. We need points. This time in 2 weeks, we need to be sat here with 7 to 9 points. And then after that, it's about making sure the performances are there with the consistency and we're getting points as well.
Yeah, 7 points, I think, is what we need to be targeting. And Ellis says 9 points, we close the gap to Leeds. Yeah, big period coming up. Let's have a little look through your comments. Just JSA Morris 05. If Ranieri gets sacked, do you think questions will be asked about the ownership of the club? Big one, that.
I think questions are already being asked. I think we've sort of seen a lot of things stirring with Scott Duxbury. It used to almost be, there's always a scapegoat in the boardroom. I think it used to be Filippo Giraldi. Now we're almost seeing it being a Scott Duxbury and some questions towards Gino as well. The thing is, right, I've said this again, it's a difficult time to work. Particularly with AFCON going on as well, with the pandemic. It doesn't seem like we've got too much money to work with at the moment as well.
Well, compared to other teams, Sam, isn't it? You look at Villa, for example.
Villa signing Coutinho yesterday. It's just ridiculous. I think we do need an investor. I think in terms of the money side of it, I think we do need to be looking at investors. But in terms of learning from mistakes, I mean, I don't want to go too much into it because, to be honest, we've been saying the same thing now for ages. I mean, as you say, it does seem they're learning from the mistakes, but is it one window too late? We could be sat here at the end of the season having had a magnificent second half of the season, but still get relegated. And we'll just say, all right, we should have signed Samir and Kamara 6 months earlier. And we'll be back to square one in the Championship again. So I think there are certain questions around the ownership. I'm not Potso out, I'm not Duxbury out, but I think we have to have a certain amount of understanding for the difficulties of working in this market compared to other teams around us who have perhaps more money.
Sure. I guess good response on that one. Mark says, somewhat fans need to realise that we aren't going anywhere to get top players coming in, so don't get your hopes up to get really good players. I mean, I guess the point to take away from that, Mark, is financially, as Sam mentioned, we don't have the power to attract a certain type of player. And the way we got around that before was through our scouting network. But ultimately, since Brexit, that has basically, killed a lot of the Potso scouting network. You look at some of the players they brought to Udinese, some of the Watford players that we've seen come through at Watford, through the Potso network to have come to Watford. So, Watford don't have the financial backing. But also, you look at Brentford on the other hand, Sam, and you think they're really smart with the way they recruit. Now, I'm not saying they're perfect at all by any means. And I think, in another season when there are probably 3 worse teams than them, they'll probably be down there. But the point is, there's a clear strategy, I feel, to the way they recruit. I think with Thomas Frank, there's a clear strategy to the way he wants to play football. And it feels like with Watford, we buy a group of players, we get them approved by the manager, and then we just kind of ask them to do with, kind of work with what he's got. And I think you either have to have a really good coach to get the best out of them, like we did in Kike's first season and with Javi, etc., or even Marco Silva in that period of time, and Ranieri at times. But the point is that it's very difficult, I think, for a manager to come in after that new managerial bounce and implement his style in the time he has and with the players he has that maybe don't suit the type of that he wants to play. Would you say that's
I agree with you. I just think going back to money quickly, I think in the summer, the impression I very much get is we're going to be relying on selling big. So whether that's selling Sarr for big money, which I don't think we'll get as much for him now due to his injury, or whether it's selling Emmanuel Dennis for big money. I think we're going to be relying a lot on that in the summer. And I think we can expect probably both to be leaving in the summer if we're being realistic. But if we're focusing on the here and now, I completely agree with you, because if you look at the success of certain sides, Brentford under Thomas Frank, previously Dean Smith, you had Aston Villa under Dean Smith, you had Leeds under Marcelo Bielsa, you have Southampton under Ralph Hasenhüttl was the perfect example. Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp, Man City under Pep Guardiola. They're letting the manager, they're saying, here's your project, buy the players you need for that project, and we'll stick with you throughout that time. It's the other way around at Watford. We've assembled a group of players and we've said, stick with the manager for as long as you want, and then we'll change it. And it should be the other way around. It should be the manager sort of picking his players for his project. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And I think that's the frustrating thing about Marco Silva, because we've said this a lot, Jacob, over the phone or at games, whatever. With Marco Silva, we had a clear identity in terms of transfer strategy. He was going to be a long-term appointment. Ultimately, it was out of the club's hands what happened, and we had to sack him. But I think Vladimirovic as well would have probably been a long-term solution in terms of building around his system. These players are getting away with manager after manager the same mistakes, which is why I don't think it's Ranieri's fault. Because as you said, it's Xisco Munoz has happened under. It's going back to Nigel Pearson. It's going back to Vladimirovic. Even a couple of these players under Marco Silva, as we say, it's the same mistakes over and over again. And it needs to change. We need a manager who can come in and build something.
Yeah, I think Luon's mentioned it here. Team always mirrors the situation at the club. We're a mess off it, so we'll be a mess on it. There is a comment from Charlotte saying the players simply haven't gelled together this season. Such a shame after the team spirit and settled team shape we had last season. It does feel like chalk and cheese with that season, Sam, in terms of, I think you even, as Charlotte mentions, team morale. Obviously, it helps when you're winning football matches, but
as you say, I think that's where the mistakes all came in the summer, because we had such good team spirit last season, but all of those players left. Will Hughes left, Chalobah left, Deeney left. I was one who probably said Deeney should have moved on. Will Hughes and Chalobah, we've spoken about their contract situations, but ultimately, by letting all of those players go, we've got rid of pretty much the whole core of the squad. That's why,
aren't you? Yeah.
I know a lot of fans will say I told you so, but I am starting to regret. I don't want to say regret it, because I think it was Deeney's probably time to go. But I think we probably should have thrown more at Will Hughes. I've said in the past we probably should have stuck with, we should have said to him, stay within the wage balance and that sort of thing. Same goes for Nathaniel Chalobah. I think we should have probably done all we can to sort of keep a settled group.
Sure. I mean, Hughes is doing really well at Palace. Every time I see him, he looks good. And Mella, if we go down, I'm very confident we'll go back straight up. Too easy for us, we'll say. But look, it's, as Charlotte says, Sam, I think we're going to wrap it up soon, because it ultimately today, as we said, the cup isn't the priority for Watford, but it's more the impact it's going to have because of the confidence, more goals conceded. We're on a really bad run at the moment, going into the three most critical games of the season, as Charlotte mentions, against our closest rivals, and I just can't see it turning it around in time. I share that sentiment, Charlotte. I'm struggling to see the improvement coming after the last few games. James says, please give Ranieri time. Defensive errors aside, we're so much more aggressive. We can always expect to score goals each game, whereas before we were wondering where a goal would even come from. That's very true. Very true. But Sam, look, just final thoughts on today, final thoughts on the period coming up for Watford and how you see it, not maybe how you see it playing out, but how you're feeling going into those games.
I'm downbeat at the moment. I think we said the word demoralising a lot today. I'm not excited. I'm making the trip up to Newcastle next week. 6:30 a.m. I have to be at the stadium for the coach. Yeah, I'm missing Burnley as I have exams that day, and I tried to negotiate doing the exam on the coach, but my parents said no. So, yeah, probably good. I'm staying at home for that one.
It's on BT, I think, that one. To be fair, I think it's on BT.
Yeah, it's on BT. Yeah, so I can watch it at home. But it's demoralising. That's the best way to say it. I think it's probably good we got a week off now, and then we just had a week off as well. But particularly after watching, it feels like we need a week off every time watching Watford. It's a good opportunity. It's a week now for new signings to settle in, perhaps get a couple more players through the door and get us ready for Newcastle. And when I say ready, we have to be on it from minute one, because Newcastle, a couple of times I've watched them, they've been fast starters, scoring in the first 5-10 minutes. And the likes of Maximin, the thoughts of that last week, a man in form. It worries me. Kieran Trippier putting balls into the box. Perhaps they sign another forward as well. Joe Linton's doing all right at the moment. I'm worried for it. And it's a game that we need to be getting 3 points, I think. It's a game we need 3 points in.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agree. And also, it's another week in the transfer window. And I think, Sam, you summed it up on Twitter that, the day before Newcastle is our deadline day, because making signings after those 3 games in a week against Newcastle, Burnley and Norwich, and you feel the impact is going to be slightly less because of those 3 really important games. And it does feel like I think centre-back will probably come in before Newcastle, Sam. I think we've been with Vida. We made a £7 million bid for Nathaniel Phillips from Liverpool. Centre-back comes in, potentially a back 3. Is that where you can see a signing coming in? Is there any other areas you think we could maybe get a signing in before Watford deadline day?
I don't know if anyone knows anything about this Kayembe bloke. Like, will Kayembe start? Do you think he'll start games?
I think he's going to come straight. He's a left-footed central midfielder, and I think they'll go for a two of. I think they'll go for a two of Kiembe and Sissoko with Pedro slightly in front. It's probably what I would go for anyway.
Yeah,
I think we need
is that in terms of 4-3-3 or 5 at the back?
Well, true. If we change it, I mean, look, you could still go 3. You could still go 5 at the back and have that as the midfield with 2 in front of Pedro. But I think they're gonna. I think look, what I would say about the signings that have been brought in so far is I like the look of them. They fit the mould of what we're looking for in terms of a left-footed centre back, a left back, and a central midfielder. But as you say, Sam, my fear is, and I tweeted this, is that I just fear it's one window too late. But we'll have to wait and see. Centre back, could see that coming in. Could see a centre back coming in, Sam.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more likely Vida because we probably won't want to spend the money on Phillips. More likely Vida. I think whether the new signing would start, I think definitely Samir and Kamara will start against Newcastle. I don't know. Again, I don't know enough about KMB, but at the same time, I know I said it's sort of demoralising. It's also an exciting week because it's a new look Watford side. It almost feels like, as I said, 3 cup finals, 3 massive games, and if we're up for it, it's going to be 3 brilliant days and 3 games that will save our season. So, if looking at it on the flip side, sort of half glass full, it's a really good opportunity for us to create some good memories, I suppose.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. That's where we're going to wrap it up. Finish Leicester 4, Watford 1. Disappointing day at the office. We're out of the 3rd round of the FA Cup, but bigger fish to fry in the Premier League. It's a huge week for Watford. By the end of 2 weeks' time, I think we'll know where we stand in this Premier League campaign. Thank you very much for watching. Please do leave a like on the video. Subscribe to WD18. Follow myself and Sam on socials at Jacob_Colshaw and Sam_UCO. And don't forget to follow WD18 here, subscribe, and also follow us at WD18 Fans for plenty more Watford fan content. We'll catch you next week ahead of that Newcastle game. We'll have a match preview for you, and we'll see you very, very soon. Thank you very much for watching. Up the Hornets.